Hey, this episode of the Adventist Millennial Podcast is sponsored by The Haystack. The Haystack is a voice for young adults in the Seventh-day Adventist Church that produces articles, music reviews, videos, and more. What's the and more? Well, you'll have to go to their website to find out. thehaystack.org. The Haystack. Life, culture, theology. Oh man, I'm here. I'm making the podcast. It didn't almost not happen, so don't even worry about that. I definitely didn't forget that it was Thursday night and that I hadn't finished editing the podcast that I recorded and that it was supposed to be loaded up and uploaded already. I definitely didn't forget that, and I definitely didn't sit around and watch YouTube and go to sleep instead of doing that. And it's definitely not early in the morning on Friday right now while I'm recording this. So yeah, just be aware of that and know that I'm extremely competent and ahead of schedule in producing, and everything is going swimmingly. So I hope you all enjoy this Father's Day episode with a brand new father. Okay, shout out to all of you fathers out there. Enjoy. Okay, welcome to the podcast.
Welcome to hosting the podcast.
Happy first Father's Day in a few days.
Thank you. It's very weird.
Are you expecting any gifts?
Not particularly.
I thought I saw Eden taking an Uber to the mall the other day.
That's quite possible.
Okay.
We're fairly certain she's been sneaking caffeine at night.
Oh, I thought you were going to say sneaking cash out of your wallet.
If I had any cash.
In the spirit of Father's Day, we're going to talk about
Does Father's Day have like a patron saint like Christmas?
Yeah, Father Christmas.
Happy Father's Day. He does double duty.
Yeah.
It's his side hustle.
We should make that a thing, like make Santa Claus like the icon of Father's Day. Or like, I don't know, who would be a good icon?
But no,
Father's
it can't be
Day?
Santa Claus. It's Father Christmas.
Oh, that's
so
true.
it'd be like the British Santa Claus.
Yeah.
With like jacked up teeth and
Is that a train?
yes. Welcome to my very cheap apartment.
I was trying to think of someone who would be a good icon for Father's Day. An iconic father. The dad in Mrs. Doubtfire.
Yeah, that movie hasn't held up too well over the years.
Okay. Let's just cut to the chase. So what have you discovered since Eden was born? Do you feel yourself a new person?
Well, the biggest thing
Do you
that
feel yourself a tired person?
well, that was gonna be what I said. The biggest thing that I've realized is how little sleep you can operate on. Like, if I knew how much I actually didn't have to sleep, I would have probably would have wasted all that time. But
It's not wasted
I kind of
sleeping.
wish I had done something more productive with myself.
Okay, but like, have you had any life revelations?
I mean, it's weird. I mean, everybody says like having a kid kind of changes your perspective and gives you a little bit of an insight into how God looks at it, how God looks at us. And I would say, to kind of play into the cliche, it does. I would say it's a catalyst for thinking about those sorts of things. I wouldn't say I have any new perspective shifts that I haven't sort of like thought about previously, but I find myself contemplating that more than I had in the past. I've kind of put myself in those shoes and thought, kind of built up an idea of how I think God looks at us, but I've certainly naturally just spent time in that space more than I did before I had kids.
Like in what way, for example?
Well, one of the things that really strikes me about having a kid, having a baby, is there's literally nothing that the child can do at this point. Like Eden's 5 weeks. She doesn't add any kind of value to the family. She doesn't add any benefit. She doesn't go out there and, contribute to the family in that sense, But yet, even though there's nothing that she could do at her age to make me love her or, improve my relationship with her, I just love her.
Yeah.
No matter, how much she cries or poops or whatever.
On one hand, she can't do anything to ingratiate herself. On the other hand, she can't really do anything to make you mad other than make you lose sleep.
Well, and that's the thing is like, how bad of a person can you really get, from an infinitesimal, we don't really grasp the depth of the goodness and the love of God and the unconditionalness of how much He loves us. And I think that, in some way, I think that the sacrifice that Jesus made and His ministry may have done something, in reality, but I think in a much bigger and more real way, a lot of it was metaphor.
What, the cross was metaphor?
Yeah, I think the whole reason Jesus came and the fact that He died and was willing to go to the ultimate sacrifice to show us just how much He loved us. Like, I don't know how much of that was, a ransom, propitiation, how much of it was God actually having to do some kind of voodoo to set everything right, as much as it was to explain to us the gravity of, like, this is how much that in the terms that you can understand, I'm willing to sacrifice everything and beyond everything that you know of to make sure that you understand how much I love you and how much I want you to be reconciled with me.
So you're telling me that just one kid and you can flush thousands of years of theology right down the toilet?
Well, I would flush thousands of years of theology down the toilet regardless of
without a kid with just one burrito.
I mean, like I said, I'm a big fan of what C.S. Lewis says in Mere Christianity. If it's helpful, great. If it doesn't add anything of value, don't believe it. So, I'm certainly not trying to make a case that, there wasn't any sort of, the Christ's death on the cross didn't actually do anything. I was just, from the standpoint of, for me, I think so much more of it is valuable in the explanation or the, giving us something to wrap our minds around, than whatever kind of behind the scenes, chess game God might be playing that we don't understand.
I could see that. How would you say, we were talking a little bit before Eden was born and a little bit too since she's been born, but you were talking about kind of the ways you were considering how we see God acting towards humans and how that may translate to the way that you try to parent.
Yeah, so it's kind of been an ongoing conversation with me and my wife. So Sarah's been kind of digging into different parenting philosophies and, watching videos and reading articles and stuff. And we've had discussions about, like, how are we going to approach parenting Eden as she grows up, and how are we going to implement discipline, and how are we going to teach her things? And so, because I'm thinking about these things, I was trying to figure out, how does God deal with us in trying to teach us things and discipline us? And I know we kind of build out these pictures of what we think God does in terms of, if you do something bad, then obviously you have a punishment. And, I am not sure that I'm willing to say he doesn't do that. But what I do notice is that there are a lot of times when it seems like there should be a clear action, consequence, punishment follow-up. And that's not what God does. Pretty frequently when God directly is involved, he intervenes so that we don't experience the consequences of our actions.
Like, do you have any examples? Like, when Bruce Almighty said, "Smite me, oh mighty smiter."
Yeah, exactly.
Nothing happened.
Exactly. That was God, demonstrating grace and sparing him from the consequences of blaspheming in that very realistic, true-to-life movie.
I think that was a documentary.
I'm pretty sure it was because I've seen it on the TV. So here, a really good example, like the first major transgression, Adam and Eve were told don't eat the fruit because the consequences of eating it,
sudden death.
Yeah. When they went ahead and ate the fruit and God came, he didn't come up and say, "Okay, I know what you guys did, and guess what?
What's going on?
All right, so who's up first for the firing squad?" He had a conversation with them. Okay, what happened? And of course they made a big mess of it and tried to pass the buck, but God didn't immediately come in and start handing out punishments for stuff that he obviously knew. He wanted to talk it out with them and help them understand why what was happening was such a big deal. You look at, the next thing in Genesis was when Cain murdered his brother. And, God came up to him and said, "Where's your brother?" He didn't say, "Hey, I saw you kill your brother, so now time for whooping."
Mm-hmm,
It was, where's your brother? What's happening? And, when Cain admits to killing his brother, he says, "I'm afraid other men are going to kill me." And so God doesn't say, "Well, tough luck. You got to, suck it up. That's what happens when you make stupid choices."
Yeah.
He said, he put a mark on, the Bible says he'll put a mark on Cain to warn other people not to kill Cain. He gave him grace. He helped him out. And I feel like there are a lot of consequences. I mean, there are a lot of stories in the Bible where the consequences that God doles out are not what we would expect in terms of dispensing justice.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, I'm trying to think of, how much of that can I bring to the table and just not raise a child that's just not going to have any concept of.
Yeah, well, that was what I was going to ask next, is because there is a sentiment, like, I don't know, in conservative American culture or like religious culture where, oh, kids these days, I'm going to discipline my kids and make sure they behave. And on one hand, I guess that works in some ways, but also, like, how have you ever seen that model work out? Like, because I feel like you see examples of parents who just, oh, whatever, I'm not gonna discipline my kids, and then they have little hellions, and then people who like just oppress their kids to the point where they are unable to function independently. Yeah. Like, is there a good example of the right way to do it?
I'm not sure if there's a good example of the right way to do it.
Well, like, for example, I know our dad has told us that when before we were born, he was like, oh, I'm going to, kind of a similar thing. I'm not going to I'm going to explain everything to them and philosophize the reasoning behind everything. And then he ended up just yelling at us because that's what little kids, I don't know, like, you know what I'm saying? There's theory and there's practice. And
Yeah. Well, and that's, I'm not sure. I'm not sure what's going to happen when the rubber meets the road.
You don't know on a scale of 1 to 10 how annoying Aiden will be yet.
Yeah. And, I'm sure there's some element of you have to take action out of either fatigue or there's, you don't have the time to let them just while away, until they acquiesce to whatever the right thing is.
That would have been you, just whiling away as a child.
So but for me, a lot of it was sort of around, came out of this idea of, if Jesus was a parent, what what kind of discipline would he be using on his children? Was he going to be like let's sit down, I'm going to tell you a story and explain to you, in that way what's going on here? Or is it going to be like, okay, well, you're 4, you don't really understand much besides I'm going to give you a whipping if you don't do it. So, would God hit a kid to teach him a lesson? Or, would he have a different way of doing something that we could emulate?
Yeah.
I mean, and so you look at the things that Jesus did. He hung around people all the time who had made terrible life decisions, and he never said, he
wasn't going around.
He wasn't going around,
Ellen White says,
telling people, well, you reaped what you sowed, so hope you learned a lesson this time. His whole ministry was going around and just asking people, do you want to get well?
Maybe the disciples were whitewashing the story.
I don't know. They sure didn't make themselves look great in it. So, I mean, the only people he really had harsh words for were the people who were trying to tell other people what God's character were like. The establishment in the religious circles, and that was the only major time he had took issue with people. But if he was hanging out with people who had jacked up lives, he just reached out to try to show them how much he loved them. He would fix their immediate needs by feeding them or healing them, and then he would tell them, go and be better. Don't do that again.
Yeah.
And it's like, could you raise a kid that way? Just like,
well, I mean,
I don't know.
The argument could be made that he's not being very successful because humanity is still, pretty not learned any lessons.
Well, I mean, I don't know. There's the argument that it didn't fix humanity, but at the same time, it spawned one of the largest and fastest growing movement in the history of mankind.
Yeah,
I mean,
true.
Christianity has been around for a long time, and it's, there's still pretty clear tenets of the original, faith that are really, they've been preserved throughout that. So it's definitely made an impact, a lasting impact.
Yeah.
If he hadn't come and done that, would the whole world have self-destructed long before that? Did it just like, stall the whole self-destruct that we've been on this path of from the beginning? Or, or did it just
like what are those little things, plastic things you put in the socket to keep you from sticking your finger in it?
Yeah, just put a plug in it for temporary fix.
I've heard an explanation before that, like, if you look at the way God treats people from the Old Testament through to now, it's like kind of like the way a parent treats a child as it's growing up. Like, he was harsh to the Israelites, like treating them like little kids, basically disciplining them opening the earth and swallowing people up and whatnot. And then there's this progression of, as we supposedly are supposed to be understanding God's character and maturing as a human race, then he deals with us differently. Do you see that, or is it just hubris to think that the human race has been learning anything over the course of history? I mean, because we still think a lot of the same things that we've always thought.
Well, I mean, that's a hard one to answer because you don't want to speak for a whole bunch of people that you don't. I mean, you don't really.
I personally have no problem
don't
speaking for everyone.
For me, I can definitely see an argument to be made that you sort of have to have some sort of ground level, or starting place in order to advance the conversation. I mean, you think about like everybody now pretty much knows how to use the internet. Anybody that's a millennial or younger probably knows how to work email, probably knows how to use social media. Those things are things that were really easy to pick up. It's not like it's hard, but then you see older generations struggle just even wrapping their head around the concept of how it works. And I mean, you can make an argument that it's just because, a lot of people as they get older are less flexible or less willing to learn new skills.
Yeah.
I mean, but there does seem to be an element that it's so different, or it's such a departure from what people knew, that it does take some sort of plasticity to be able to fully grasp it. And so, if you keep working your way back, are there things that, concepts in philosophy, things about, that we take for granted as basic and, well, clearly, if this is this and that's that, and that should equal this, I don't know. I don't know if somebody who doesn't have that base to start with would be able to grasp if God just sat down and did a TED Talk and said, okay, guys, here's the plan. Here's what's going on. You wouldn't even have any kind of framework to hang that on.
Yeah.
And so we talk about, a lot of the stuff that we know as just foregone conclusions. It's clear, it's really easy to see, if something has been researched.
The Earth is round. Psych.
We take science, for example, the scientific method of studying something, and you test it enough times and you see that that's probably going to happen the same time every time. Yeah. That doesn't matter. That doesn't mean anything to somebody who doesn't already accept the principles of, so much of Western thought, that was kind of developed over the years. And, so you have to have some sort of faith in an establishment of, there are people who have some kind of credibility who are going to write things down. You're going to have to believe that, research papers are all based on some kind of evidence. You have to have experienced something that, you can extrapolate, does the same thing. So there are so many built-in assumptions to different things that, it could be that God had to start at a much more rudimentary place and kind of build, our collective consciousness and ability to more fully understand what's really going on. I don't know.
Yeah. Or maybe what if he's independent of what we do or understand, demonstrating the different styles of, and now I'm going to show you what authoritarian parenting is like. Now I'm going to show you, and it doesn't matter what we do. Just hope you're in the loving period.
Maybe. I mean, I don't know. I don't know if it's, I don't know if it's so much that God uses different approaches, or as we've come up with more sophisticated philosophical and, tools to kind of describe things, we've come up with more nuanced explanations of how God operates. I don't know.
Yeah. Either that or I'm never sure if we're building on and becoming more nuanced or just degenerating. Like we've talked before about like
we just paint God a little more like us every generation.
Yeah, exactly. Or like the conversations we've had in the past of like, what if we've lost the ability to access magic or whatever, just like the degeneration. We've seen the human race physically just degenerate. So what if that's the same thing and we're like, oh, we're evolving, and really we're just like getting worse and worse and worse, and God is like, stop.
Like I'm trying to think of the movie, but I can't. Some scene in some movie where somebody's speaking really eloquently, and then like you cut to, oh, actually they're drunk and they're just like haranguing everybody in slurred speech and not making any sense.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, well, do you have any prophecies or foreshadowing for our next installment when Eden has become a proper hellion and we revisit her childhood? Do you have any predictions?
Man, I don't know. That I guess a big part of the reason I'm kind of thinking about how we're going to parent and wrestling with this stuff is I don't know what the answer is yet. I don't know what I'm going to do, because I mean, it's one thing to say, oh yeah, I think I can find a way to, parent my kid without spanking them or without being too coercive. But then, what do you do with somebody, a little 3 or 4 year old who's just, at that boundary testing stage and they're willfully defiant and all they understand is like, you're not supposed to do that. So let me try and do it. It's like, you can only have so many conversations with the 4-year-old until you
do you ever get concerned that like about the, not to like make you concerned if you're not, but like the inevitability that every parent in some way like damages their child?
I don't know. I'm not too, there's a little bit of that, but I'm not a particularly worried person. I wouldn't be surprised.
You're not so neurotic.
I wouldn't be surprised if it might keep Sarah up once or twice.
You're like, oh, we'll just screw up Eden. Who cares?
But I mean, for me, I feel like the answer is sort of like you look at other people who have had way more traumatic, life experience than I have, and they still manage to find a way to come out somewhat well adjusted.
Yeah.
I mean, now that doesn't always happen.
Yeah.
Some people get really damaged and messed up, but for me, it's sort of like, people in general can be very resilient, and if you do your best job, even if you have blind spots and you do some really stupid things with your kid, or you don't prepare them well enough for something, like, they're going to be better than you because they started off with tools that you had to figure out and learn as you grew up. So you're able to, give them a little bit more than, you started off with.
Yeah.
So they'll be able to, figure things out.
I guess if you could teach them one thing, teach them how to like grow through trial.
Yeah.
As I give you this trial unknowingly, grow through it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, if anybody has any parenting advice, parenting tips, keep them to yourselves. No, just kidding. If you have comments, questions, thoughts, advice, send them to me at adventistmillennial@gmail.com, or on Instagram or Twitter at SDA Millennial, or you could just come directly to Aaron's house and give him advice, unsolicited advice.
Word of warning, we don't have air conditioning. So
only
come
come
in
in
the winter.
Yes. And we will reconvene when Eden turns 18 and see how this all played out.
Well, I remember when I was young and stupid, and we thought we weren't ever going to spank her, and it was just a spanking fest all through her teen years.
And now she doesn't have any legs. Okay, so Eden, if you're
And
listening
look
to
how
this
much
in the
she's
future,
overcome.
okay, let's leave a message for future Eden.
Eden, I love you. There's nothing that I can imagine that you could ever do that would make me not love you. And I hope you're gonna be able to understand that one day.
And she's laughing as she says, "Yes, but you've cut me off. You've extricated me, exiled me from the family, so that was a lie." Just kidding. My message for Eden is learn jokes. Okay, have a nice day, everyone.